Lydia Ashworth walked through the empty halls of the great library. Her soft shoes made no sound on the old stone floors. At 127 years old, she was still young for an elf, but she felt tired tonight. The library was her home, her job, and her whole world. She carried a small lamp that gave off warm yellow light. Most elves could see well in the dark, but Lydia liked the comfort of light when she worked late. Tonight felt different somehow. The air seemed heavy, like before a big storm. The library held millions of books from across the galaxy. Stories, science, history, and magic filled the tall shelves. But Lydia knew there were gaps. Whole sections of history had been removed long ago. The elders said it was for the good of all people, but Lydia always wondered what knowledge had been lost. She was checking the basement storage rooms when she noticed something odd. One wall looked newer than the others. The stones were a slightly different color. Lydia ran her fingers along the wall and felt a small crack. When she pushed, a section of the wall moved. Behind the false wall was a narrow passage. Cool air flowed out, carrying the smell of old paper and dust. Lydia's heart beat faster. In all her years working here, she had never seen this passage. She held up her lamp and stepped inside. The passage led to a round room carved from solid rock. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Books, scrolls, and metal containers filled every space. But these were not like the books upstairs. These had strange writing on their covers. Some were made of materials she did not recognize. Lydia moved closer to read the writing. Her lamplight fell on words written in the old human language. She could read it because her job required knowledge of dead languages. But humans had been gone for 300 years. Why were their books hidden here? She pulled a thick book from the shelf. The cover read, Military Strategy and Tactics by Helen Carter. Inside, she found detailed drawings of weapons, battle plans, and something called psychological warfare. The humans had been very good at war, the elders always said. Too good. That was why they were gone. As Lydia read the first chapter, she heard a sound from outside. It was deep and low, like thunder, but it lasted too long. She knew that sound. Dragon wings. Dragons lived in the mountains around the city, but they rarely came close to elf settlements. They kept to themselves and bothered no one. The peace treaty signed 200 years ago made sure of that. But now one was flying overhead. Lydia kept reading. Helen Carter wrote about something called unit cohesion and adaptive leadership. The words were simple, but the ideas were new to Lydia. Humans seemed to think differently about command and control than elves did. Another dragon call echoed outside. Then another. Lydia looked up from the book. 3 dragons in one night was very unusual. Maybe they were just hunting. But the sounds came from different directions, like they were circling the city. She turned back to the book. Helen Carter described battles, where humans worked with other species as equals, not as rulers over servants. This was different from what Lydia had been taught. History said humans tried to control everyone, which was why the galaxy had to stop them. The dragon calls grew louder and more frequent. Lydia realized they were getting closer to the library. She could hear the powerful beats of their wings, clearly now. Part of her wanted to go upstairs and see what was happening, but the book held her attention. Helen Carter wrote about something called the Dragon Accords. Lydia read faster. According to this text, humans and dragons had been partners, not enemies. They had worked together to explore space and fight common threats. Dragons had been citizens in human territory with full rights and respect. This could not be true. Everyone knew dragons were dangerous wild animals that had to be contained. The peace treaty kept them away from civilization for good reason. But Helen Carter wrote about dragons like they were people, smart people who could plan and think and feel. A loud thud shook the library above. Then another. Dragons were landing on the roof. Lydia's hands shook as she turned the pages. Helen Carter described dragon intelligence, dragon culture, dragon art and music. She wrote about dragon cities among the stars and dragon ships that could travel faster than light. None of this matched what Lydia had been taught. More thuds came from above. How many dragons were up there? Lydia had never heard of so many gathering in one place. The peace treaty limited them to small family groups. Large gatherings were forbidden because they might threaten the cities. She read about human-dragon military units that protected trade routes and explored dangerous regions of space. Dragons served as scouts, fighters, and diplomats. Humans trusted them with their most important missions. In return, dragons found purpose and belonging in human society. The dragon calls outside changed tone. They sounded almost like they were talking to each other. Long, complex sounds that went up and down like music. Lydia had never heard dragons make such varied noises before. Usually they just roared when angry or called when hunting. She looked at her watch. She had been reading for 3 hours, but it felt like minutes. The book was full of information that changed everything she thought she knew. If humans and dragons had really been partners, then why did the war happen? Why did the galaxy turn against humanity? Heavy footsteps echoed in the library above. The night guard was checking on the noises. Lydia heard him calling her name. She should go up and explain what she found, but something told her to be careful. These books were hidden for a reason. She closed Helen Carter's book and picked up another one. This one was written by someone named Lisa Stone. The title read Void War Tactics Defending Against the Swarm. Lydia had never heard of any Void War or Swarm, but as she opened the book, more dragons landed outside. Whatever was in these books, the dragons could sense it. They were gathering because of her reading. She was sure of it now. The question was whether they came as friends or enemies. Lydia looked at the hidden library around her and realized she was about to find out. The next morning, Lydia woke up on the floor of the hidden room. She had fallen asleep reading Lisa Stone's book about the Void War. Her neck was stiff and her back hurt, but her mind was full of new ideas. The book described an enemy from outside, the galaxy that ate entire star systems. She climbed the stairs to the main library. Through the tall windows, she could see dragons perched on nearby buildings. They sat very still, like statues, but their eyes followed her as she moved. There were at least 20 of them now. The biggest one sat on top of the clock tower across the street. Marcus, the head librarian, was waiting for her at her desk. His face was pale and worried. He was older than Lydia by 50 years, but he looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. "Where were you?" Marcus asked. "The guards looked everywhere. And what is happening with these dragons? They started gathering after sunset, and they will not leave." Lydia sat down at her desk and tried to look normal. "I was doing research in the basement. I must have lost track of time. As for the dragons, maybe they are just passing through." Marcus shook his head. "Dragons do not gather like this. I called the council. They are sending someone to investigate. Until then, we should stay inside and avoid the windows." Lydia nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Lisa Stone's book had described the same behavior. Dragons gathering when they sensed a threat to the galaxy. According to the book, dragons had better instincts about danger than most other species. They could feel problems coming before anyone else noticed. Throughout the day, more dragons arrived. They came from all directions, flying in alone or in small groups. By afternoon, there were over 100 of them surrounding the library district. They did not attack or threaten anyone. They just watched and waited. The city guards tried to scare them away, but the dragons ignored the noise and bright lights. News reporters came to film the strange gathering. Scientists came to study dragon behavior. But the dragons only seemed interested in one building, the library where Lydia worked. That evening, Lydia snuck back down to the hidden room. She had spent all day thinking about what she had read. Now she needed to learn more. She picked up a new book, this one written by someone named Maya Brooks. The title was Personal Journal of Captain Maya Brooks, Dragon Corps Commander. Maya Brooks wrote about her daily life working with dragons. She described her dragon partner, a female named Skyfire, like a close friend. They had flown together for 10 years, exploring new worlds and fighting space pirates. Maya trusted Skyfire with her life, and Skyfire did the same. The journal entries were personal and honest. Maya wrote about celebrating holidays with dragon, families, learning dragon songs, and even falling in love with a dragon diplomat named Thunderwing. The relationship between humans and dragons was not just professional, it was personal and deep. Lydia read about dragon cities built on gas giant planets, where dragons could fly freely through colorful clouds. Human engineers had helped design these cities while dragons had shared their knowledge of weather and atmospheric flight. Together they had created something beautiful that neither species could have built alone. As she read, Lydia heard soft scratching sounds from above. She looked up at the ceiling and realized the dragons were moving around on the library roof. They were not just sitting anymore. They were active, like they were preparing for something. Maya Brooks wrote about dragon intelligence in detail. Dragons could do complex math in their heads, understand multiple languages, and plan strategies that took years to complete. They had long memories and could hold grudges for centuries, but they also felt deep loyalty and love for their friends. Most interesting was what Maya wrote about dragon communication. Dragons spoke to each other using more than just sounds. They used body language, scent, and something Maya called emotional resonance. Dragons could sense each other's feelings across great distances. This was how they could coordinate large groups without any visible signals. Lydia put down the journal and thought about this. If dragons could sense emotions, then they might be feeling something from the book she was reading. The books were written by humans who had cared deeply about dragons. Maybe that emotional connection was still there, somehow preserved in the words. She picked up another book, this one by Admiral Claire Morgan. It was titled Emergency Protocols for Species Survival. The first chapter was about something called the Void Swarm, the same enemy Lisa Stone had written about. According to Admiral Morgan, the Void Swarm was not made of normal matter. It was something else, something that consumed energy and life itself. It moved between galaxies, eating everything in its path. The creatures in the swarm could not be reasoned with or fought using normal weapons, but humans and dragons together had found ways to fight them. Dragons could sense the swarm coming before any machines could detect it. Humans could build weapons that hurt the void creatures. Working together, they had pushed the swarm back and saved the galaxy once before. The Admiral's book contained detailed star maps showing the swarm's last known position. According to her calculations, it would return someday. When it did, the galaxy would need the Human-Dragon Alliance again. Without that partnership, everyone would die. Lydia felt cold as she read this. The Human-Dragon Alliance was gone. Humans were dead, and dragons were kept away from civilization. If the Void Swarm came back now, no one would be ready for it. She heard a new sound from outside. Dragon voices, but not the simple calls she was used to. These were complex musical sounds that went on for minutes at a time. It sounded almost like singing, but deeper and more emotional than any music she had ever heard. Lydia climbed the stairs to look out a window. In the moonlight, she could see dragons arranged in a large circle around the library. The biggest dragon, the one from the clock tower, was in the center. It was making the musical sounds, and the other dragons were responding in harmony. It was beautiful and frightening at the same time. Lydia had never seen dragons behave like this. According to everything she had been taught, dragons were barely smarter than wild animals. But this looked like a ceremony, or a council meeting, or something even more important. She went back down to the hidden room and picked up Maya Brooks's journal again. She found an entry about dragon councils. Maya described similar gatherings, where dragons would sing their history and make important decisions. The songs could last for hours and contained information passed down for thousands of years. Maybe the dragons outside were remembering something. Maybe the books Lydia was reading were helping them remember what they had lost when humanity died. The emotional connections, the partnerships, the shared purpose, all of it had been taken away when the galaxy decided humans were too dangerous to live. Lydia read until dawn. When the sun came up, the dragon singing stopped. But the dragons did not leave. If anything, there were more of them now. They filled the rooftops and streets around the library. The city had never seen anything like it. Marcus arrived early, looking even more worried than before. "The council is coming today," he told Lydia. "They want to know why the dragons are here. They think someone in the library is causing this." Lydia felt a chill. If the council discovered the hidden room and the human books, they would destroy everything. All this knowledge would be lost forever. And somehow she knew the dragons would not let that happen peacefully. She looked out the window at the gathered dragons. They were watching the library with intelligent eyes, waiting for something. Lydia was beginning to understand what they wanted. They remembered, deep in their ancient minds, what it felt like to have human friends. They could sense those memories, stirring as she read the forbidden books. The question was, what did they expect her to do about it? High Council leader Nathaniel Brightwater arrived exactly 1 hour later. He was older than any elf Lydia had ever seen, with silver hair and eyes that had witnessed centuries of galactic history. He came with only 2 guards, which told Lydia that he was either very confident or very desperate. She met him in the library's main hall, still wearing the dragon crown. Starfire stood beside her while the other dragons watched from the upper balconies. The ancient elf looked at the scene with mixture of shock and recognition. "I remember the last time I saw one of those crowns," Nathaniel said quietly. "It was on the head of Commander Susan Wells during the evacuation of Kepler Station. She died holding back the Void Swarm while 10,000 civilians escaped." Lydia felt Starfire's surprise through their mental connection. The dragon recognized the name from her own memories. Susan Wells had been Starfire's first human partner, 350 years ago. "You were there during the Void War," Lydia realized. "You saw the Alliance in action." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "I was a young officer then. I watched humans and dragons work together to save worlds that my people had written off as lost. It was impressive." He walked closer, studying Lydia's face. "But you are not human. How can you wear their crown?" "Because someone needs to," Lydia answered. "The Void Swarm is returning in 47 years. The dragons remember how to fight it, but they need human leadership methods. Since there are no humans available, they chose the next best thing. Someone who has studied their ways." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke the words Lydia had been hoping to hear. "Show me what you have learned." For the next 2 hours, Lydia presented everything she had discovered in the hidden archive. She showed Nathaniel the coordinates of the surviving human colonies, the tactical manuals for fighting the Void Swarm, and most importantly, Admiral Morgan's calculations proving exactly when the enemy would return. The old elf studied each piece of evidence carefully. His face grew more troubled with each revelation. Finally, he set down the last book and looked directly at Lydia. "The Council knew some of this," he admitted. "We have been tracking unusual energy readings at the galaxy's edge for 20 years. Our scientists believe something large is approaching, but they estimated we had at least a century to prepare." "Admiral Morgan was very good at math," Lydia said. "Her calculations account for variables your scientists probably do not know about. The Void Swarm does not travel in straight lines. It follows energy currents that most species cannot detect." Nathaniel rubbed his temples like he had a headache. "If you are right, we need to begin preparation immediately, but the Council will never agree to rebuild the Human-Dragon Alliance. Too many powerful families gained wealth and position when humanity was eliminated." Lydia had expected this. She had read about similar political problems in human military manuals. When facing internal resistance to necessary changes, demonstrate the cost of failure through small, controllable examples. "What if we prove the Alliance works?" she suggested. "Start small, with volunteer units. Show the Council that human tactics really can make the difference." Before Nathaniel could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the city. Emergency sirens wailed as automated voices announced a crisis at the galaxy's edge. Something had attacked one of the outer monitoring stations. Nathaniel spoke rapidly into his communication device. The reply made his face go pale. "Void Swarm scouts," he told Lydia. 3 ships, confirmed hostile. They destroyed Station Omega-7 before our fleet could respond. Lydia felt Starfire's excitement through their connection. The dragon had been waiting for this moment for centuries. "How long until your main fleet can reach the area?" Lydia asked. 6 hours at minimum, Nathaniel replied. But by then the scouts will have gathered intelligence and escaped back to the main swarm. Or we could stop them now, Lydia said. She turned to Starfire and spoke in the command language she had learned from Maya Brooks's journal. Signal all clan leaders. Emergency deployment hunter formation. We leave in 10 minutes. Starfire sang out a complex command call that echoed across the city. Within moments, dragons began launching from rooftops and mountainsides. Not just the ones that had been gathered around the library, but hundreds more that had been waiting hidden in the surrounding area. Nathaniel stared in amazement as the dragons formed into precise military formations in the sky above the city. This is impossible. We have treaties limiting dragon numbers in populated areas. Dragons have been very good at hiding when they need to, Lydia said, echoing her earlier words about humans. They have been preparing for this day for 3 centuries. She walked to the window and looked up at Starfire, who hovered just outside. Ready for one more flight with a human commander? She asked in the old Alliance language. Starfire's answer was to extend her claw toward the window in invitation. Lydia had never flown on a dragon before, but she had read detailed descriptions in Maya Brooks' journal. She climbed onto Starfire's back and settled into the natural riding position behind the dragon's neck. The crown allowed her to feel Starfire's emotions and intentions, making their connection as natural as breathing. Wait, Nathaniel called as they prepared to leave. You cannot just fly off to fight the Void Swarm. You are not trained for combat. I have read every human tactical manual in that archive, Lydia replied. Admiral Morgan's emergency protocols, General Lisa Stone's Void War strategies, Captain Maya Brooks' dragonflight formations. I know what to do. She looked down at the old elf. But I need you to do something too. Contact the human colonies using the coordinates in Admiral Morgan's log. Tell them the dragons have chosen a new queen and the alliance is being rebuilt. Ask them to send everything they know about the latest Void Swarm activity. Nathaniel nodded reluctantly. And if you do not return from this mission? Lydia smiled. Then at least the galaxy will know that humans and dragons together can still make the impossible happen. Starfire launched into the sky with powerful wing beats. Around them, 200 dragons formed into the attack formations Lydia had studied in the human manuals. They looked like a military force from the golden age of the Alliance, magnificent and deadly. The flight to the galaxy's edge took 4 hours at maximum speed. Lydia used the time to coordinate with the dragonflight leaders, adapting Admiral Morgan's Void War tactics for their current situation. The dragons responded to her commands with enthusiasm they had not felt in centuries. When they reached the destroyed monitoring station, they found the 3 Void Swarm scouts exactly where Admiral Morgan's manual said they would be, feeding on the station's energy core to prepare for their return journey. The void creatures were horrible to look at. They seemed to be made of living darkness that consumed light and matter. But Lydia had read detailed descriptions of their weaknesses in General Lisa Stone's tactical notes. Formation Delta 7, she commanded through Starfire. Spread pattern, focus fire on energy joints. Do not let them touch you. The dragons attacked with precision that would have made their human partners proud. They used hit-and-run tactics, coordinated strikes, and protective formations that kept all of them safe while slowly wearing down the enemy. When the last Void Scout was destroyed, the dragons sang a victory song that carried across the empty space between stars. It was the same song Maya Brooks had described hearing after the Battle of Kepler Station, a song of hope and renewed purpose. The flight back to the capital took longer because they brought proof of their victory. Physical samples of void creature material that elf scientists could study, energy readings that confirmed Admiral Morgan's calculations, and most importantly, evidence that the Human-Dragon Alliance still worked. They landed in the city's main plaza just as the elf fleet was preparing to launch for the same mission. Thousands of civilians had gathered to watch the dragons return. Many had never seen dragons cooperate with any other species before. Nathaniel was waiting in the plaza, with a full council delegation. His expression was a mixture of relief and amazement. The monitoring stations confirm it, he announced. The Void Scouts have been eliminated. No elf casualties, Minimal collateral damage. Council leader Elena Whiteheart stepped forward. She looked older and more tired than when Lydia had last seen her. What you have accomplished should be impossible, she said. Dragons acting with military discipline, following complex strategies, working as a team. Our experts said it could not be done. Your experts never read human training manuals, Lydia replied. Humans understood that dragons are not animals to be controlled, but partners to be respected. Treat them as equals, and they will fight beside you against any enemy. Elena looked around the plaza at the hundreds of dragons who had participated in the mission. They were arranged in perfect formation, waiting for their queen's next command. What do you want from us? She asked. Recognition of the new alliance, Lydia said. Equal status for dragons in elf society. Permission to contact the human colonies and invite them home. And resources to prepare for the real war that is coming. And in return, Lydia gestured to Starfire and the other dragons. The most effective military force the galaxy has ever seen. Ready to defend every world and every species when the Void Swarm arrives in full force. Lydia stepped into the main hall where 5 massive dragons waited among the bookshelves. Their eyes followed her every movement, but they did not seem threatening. The largest dragon, with silver scales that gleamed like metal, lowered her great head until she was at Lydia's eye level. The dragon made a sound that was almost like words. Not quite speech, but closer than any animal noise Lydia had ever heard. She remembered what Maya Brooks had written about dragon communication and tried to respond in kind. I understand you are here because of the books, Lydia said slowly. The human books downstairs. The silver dragon's eyes widened slightly. She made another complex sound and the other dragons responded with harmonious rumbles. They were definitely trying to communicate with her. Lydia went back to the hidden room and brought up one of the human books. The moment she appeared with Admiral Morgan's log, all 5 dragons became very still and focused. The silver dragon carefully extended one enormous claw and gently touched the book's cover. The effect was immediate. The dragon's eyes closed and she made a sound like singing, but deeper and more emotional than any music Lydia had ever heard. The other dragons joined in, creating a harmony that made the whole building vibrate. They were remembering. The books contained not just words, but the emotional memories of humans who had loved and trusted dragons. When the dragons touched the books, they could feel those memories again. Over the next 3 days, Lydia developed a routine. She would read human books aloud to the dragons, who listened with intense attention. They seemed to understand much more than she had expected. When she read about flight tactics, they would demonstrate the maneuvers with their wings. When she read about dragon culture, they would sing the traditional songs mentioned in the texts. But the peaceful routine could not last. On the 4th morning, the elven military arrived. General Patricia Stone led a force of 200 soldiers armed with dragon-stunning weapons. They surrounded the library and demanded that Lydia surrender herself and dismiss the dragons. She watched from the window as General Stone set up a command post across the street. This is your final warning, the general announced through a loudspeaker. You are harboring dangerous creatures and disturbing the peace. Come out now and the dragons will not be harmed. Lydia knew this was a lie. She had read enough human military manuals to understand the situation. The elves were not here to arrest her. They were here to destroy the dragons and burn the human books. They could not allow the alliance to be rebuilt. She turned to the silver dragon, who had been her closest companion over the past few days. They want to separate us, she said. They want to destroy everything humans and dragons built together. The dragon made a sound that Lydia had learned meant agreement. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into a pouch on her chest and pulled out a small metal object. It was a crown, made of silver and shaped like dragon wings. Lydia stared at the crown. She had read about it in Maya Brooks' journal. It was one of the dragon crowns, ancient symbols of leadership that had been given to human commanders during the Alliance. Maya Brooks herself had worn one when she led the dragon. Torsum, the silver dragon, held out the crown and made a questioning sound. She was asking Lydia to accept leadership of the dragons just as humans had done centuries ago. I cannot, Lydia whispered. I am not human. I do not know how to lead armies or fight wars. But even as she said it, Lydia realized it was not entirely true. She had read dozens of human military manuals. She understood their tactics, their strategies, their ways of thinking about leadership and loyalty. More importantly, she had learned to think like a human, to see problems as challenges to overcome rather than facts to accept. The sound of marching feet echoed outside. General Stone was moving her troops into position for an assault. In a few minutes, they would attack the library with weapons designed to paralyze dragons. The magnificent creatures around her would be captured or killed, and the human knowledge would be destroyed forever. Lydia made her decision. She took the crown from the dragon's claw and placed it on her head. The moment the crown touched her forehead, every dragon in the city roared at once. It was not a sound of anger or fear, but of joy and recognition. After 300 years, they had a leader again. The silver dragon spoke, and this time Lydia understood her perfectly, not through words but through the emotional connection the crown created. The dragon's name was Starfire, and she had been alive during the original alliance. She remembered flying alongside human pilots, fighting the void swarm and feeling the deep trust that bound the two species together. Now that trust was renewed. Starfire and her people were ready to follow Lydia wherever she led them, just as they had followed human commanders long ago. General Stone's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Begin the assault. Take the building and secure the targets." Lydia felt a calmness settle over her that she had never experienced before. She was no longer a frightened librarian hiding in a basement. She was a dragon queen, and she had work to do. She spoke to Starfire in the human command language she had learned from the books. Signal the outside dragons. Formation 7, defensive perimeter. Protect civilians but do not kill unless absolutely necessary. Starfire sang out a complex musical command that carried far beyond the library walls. Instantly, dragons began moving into position around the building. But they did not attack the approaching soldiers. Instead, they formed protective barriers between the elves and any civilians who might be caught in the fighting. General Stone's troops hesitated when they saw the organized dragon response. This was not the random aggression they had expected. The dragons were moving like a trained military unit, using tactics that seemed almost human in their precision. Lydia walked to the library's main entrance and opened the doors. She stood in the doorway wearing the dragon crown, with Starfire beside her and 3 other dragons visible through the windows behind her. "General Stone," she called out, "I am Lydia Ashworth, keeper of human knowledge and chosen leader of the dragon clans. I request a meeting to discuss terms." The general stared at her for a long moment. "There are no terms. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." Lydia had read about this situation in Colonel Amy Peterson's leadership manual. When facing an enemy who would not negotiate, demonstrate strength while maintaining moral authority. Show them what they would lose by fighting you. "I have something you need to see," Lydia said. She held up Admiral Morgan's log. "Information about a threat that will destroy the galaxy in less than 50 years. Your superiors know about it, but they have no plan to stop it." General Stone's expression changed slightly. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "I do not know what you are talking about." "The Void Swarm," Lydia said clearly. "It is coming back, and without human dragon alliance tactics, everyone will die, including your people." Several of the general's officers exchanged worried glances. They had heard rumors about an ancient threat, but most thought it was just a legend. Lydia continued. "The dragons remember the last war against the swarm. They know how to fight it. But they need human strategies and human leadership to be effective. That is why they chose me." She gestured to the dragons positioned around the library district. "Look at them, General. They are not attacking your soldiers, they are protecting civilians. This is human military doctrine. Minimum necessary force, protection of innocents, strategic positioning for defense rather than aggression." "General," Stone was clearly uncomfortable. Her mission had been to deal with dangerous animals, not to face an organized military force using familiar tactics. "You have 1 hour to contact your superiors," Lydia said. Tell them the dragons have a new queen, and she wants to discuss the Void Swarm situation. If they refuse to meet, we will leave this city and find the hidden human colonies ourselves. The general's eyes widened. Hidden colonies. That is impossible. All humans were accounted for during the purge. Lydia smiled. Read your history, General. Humans were very good at hiding when they needed to. Admiral Morgan left detailed coordinates for 47 colony ships that escaped the Elven fleets. Would you like to know where they are? For the first time since the siege began, General Stone looked uncertain. She spoke quietly into her communication device, then looked back at Lydia. My superiors will arrive within the hour. But if this is some kind of trick— No tricks, Lydia promised. Just information that could save the galaxy. The dragons and I will wait. She turned and walked back into the library, leaving the general to wonder what she had gotten herself into. As the doors closed behind her, Starfire made a sound that Lydia now recognized as dragon laughter. The first step in rebuilding the alliance was complete. Now came the hard part, convincing the Elven leadership that they needed the very thing they had tried to destroy. The Elven Council arrived at noon in their formal robes. Lydia watched from her window as 5 council members walked through the crowds of dragons. The massive creatures moved aside to let them pass, but their eyes never left the elves. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Council leader Elena Whiteheart was a tall, serious woman who had ruled the city for 200 years. She walked straight to Marcus and demanded answers. Lydia could hear their voices from across the library. This is unprecedented, Elena said. Dragons have not gathered in such numbers since the war. We need to know what has triggered this behavior. Marcus spread his hands helplessly. We have done nothing different. We catalog books, help researchers, maintain the collection. Nothing that would interest dragons. Elena's sharp eyes scanned the library. Search every room. Check every book that has been touched recently. There must be something. Lydia felt her heart racing. She had to get back to the hidden room and hide the human books. But 3 council guards were already blocking the stairs to the basement. She was trapped at her desk, trying to look busy while the council tore apart her workplace. The search took 4 hours. Council members examined every recent checkout record, every research request, every book that had been moved in the past week. They found nothing unusual because Lydia had been careful to cover her tracks. But Elena was not satisfied. She stood in the center of the main hall and raised her voice so everyone could hear. Something in this building is attracting the dragons. We will find it, even if we have to tear down every wall. That evening, after the council left, Lydia made a dangerous decision. She waited until Marcus went home, then snuck down to the hidden room one more time. She needed to understand what was really happening before the council discovered the truth. She picked up a new book, this one written by Admiral Claire Morgan, but this was not a military manual. It was labeled Personal Log Final Days of Humanity. Her hand shook as she opened it. Admiral Morgan wrote about the last human colony in the galaxy. They had been hiding for months while Elven fleets hunted them down. The colony ships were damaged and running out of supplies. Thousands of humans, including children, were dying slowly in the cold of space. But the Admiral was not writing about defeat. She was writing about hope. The colony had found something important before the elves destroyed their research stations. They had discovered that the Void Swarm was coming back, and they had calculated exactly when it would arrive. The swarm would reach the galaxy in 350 years. Admiral Morgan was writing her log exactly 300 years ago. That meant the swarm would return in 50 years, maybe less. Lydia read faster. The Admiral had hidden copies of all human knowledge in secret locations across the galaxy. Not just military information, but science, art, philosophy, and most importantly, everything humans had learned about working with dragons. She had hoped that someday, someone would find this knowledge and use it to prepare for the swarm's return. The book contained coordinates for dozens of hidden human colonies that had escaped the purge. Small groups of humans were still alive, out there, waiting for someone to find them. They had been alone for 3 centuries, but they had survived. As Lydia read about the hidden colonies, she heard new sounds from outside. Dragon roars, but not angry ones. These sounded like calls of joy or excitement. She went to the window and saw something that made her gasp. Young dragons were arriving. Not the ancient, scarred creatures that had been gathering for days, but sleek, bright dragons that looked barely old enough to fly. They swooped and dived through the air like they were celebrating something. An old dragon on the library roof spread its wings and called out in a voice that shook the windows. The young dragons answered back, their voices high and musical. Lydia realized she was watching something that had not happened in centuries. Old dragons teaching the young ones the ancient songs. She went back to Admiral Morgan's log. The Admiral described exactly this behavior. When dragons found hope after a long period of despair, they would gather their young and sing the memory songs. They would pass down the stories of better times, preparing the next generation for what was to come. The dragons outside were not just remembering the past, they were preparing for the future. They could sense that the void swarm was coming, and they were getting ready to fight it again. But they needed human partners to have any chance of winning. Lydia kept reading. Admiral Morgan had included detailed instructions for anyone who found her log. How to contact the hidden human colonies, how to rebuild the Human-Dragon Alliance, and most importantly, how to convince the galaxy that humanity was needed again. But there was a warning too. The Elven Council knew about the Void Swarm. They had always known. The real reason they destroyed humanity was not because humans were dangerous to the galaxy's peace. It was because humans were changing the galaxy's power structure. Under human influence, other species had started demanding equal rights and representation. The elves had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years by keeping other species separate and weak. Humans threatened that system by bringing species together as equals. So the elves had invented stories about human aggression and convinced the galaxy that humanity was a threat that had to be eliminated. Now the Void Swarm was returning, and the elves knew their fleets could not stop it alone. They needed the Human-Dragon Alliance, but they had destroyed it themselves. The Admiral's log suggested that they might try to rebuild it in secret, using elves trained in human tactics to command the dragons. Lydia felt sick as she read this. Everything she had been taught about history was a lie. Humanity had not been a threat to peace. They had been the galaxy's best hope for survival. The elves had murdered an entire species to protect their political power, and now everyone would pay the price. She heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy boots moving carefully. Council guards were coming to search the basement again. Lydia quickly hid Admiral Morgan's log and picked up a normal library book. 3 guards entered the basement storage area. They had tools for detecting hidden rooms and secret passages. It would not take them long to find the false wall. Check every wall, the lead guard said. Use the sonic scanners. If there is anything hidden down here, we will find it. Lydia pretended to organize old books while the guards worked. Her heart pounded as they moved closer to the hidden entrance. In a few minutes, they would discover the secret room and all the human knowledge inside. That was when the dragons acted. The building shook as dozens of dragons landed on the roof at once. The lights flickered and books fell from the shelves. The guards stopped their search and looked up nervously. A dragon roar echoed through the building so loud and deep that Lydia felt it in her bones. Then another and another. The dragons were not just calling, they were making demands. The lead guard spoke into his communication device. Base command, this is basement team. The dragons are becoming aggressive. Request immediate backup. The reply crackled with static. Negative basement team, do not engage the dragons. Complete your search and report back. But the dragons had other plans. Heavy footsteps echoed in the main library above. Not boots this time, but claws on stone. The dragons had entered the building. The guards looked at each other with wide eyes. No dragon had set foot inside an elf building since the peace treaty was signed. This was either a declaration of war or something even more serious. Sir, one guard said to his leader, maybe we should leave. Come back when the situation is calmer. The lead guard nodded reluctantly. Pack up the equipment. We will continue this search later. As the guards hurried upstairs, Lydia heard new sounds from the main library. deep, rumbling voices that almost sounded like words. The dragons were not just roaring anymore. They were trying to communicate. She crept up the stairs and peered into the main hall. 5 enormous dragons stood among the bookshelves, their heads nearly touching the high ceiling. They were looking directly at the basement entrance like they knew exactly where she was. The biggest dragon, an ancient female with silver scales, made a sound that was almost like speech. Other dragons answered her, their voices forming complex patterns that reminded Lydia of the communication methods Maya Brooks had described. Lydia understood what was happening. The dragons were protecting her and the hidden knowledge. They knew she was the key to rebuilding the alliance their species needed to survive. But their protection came with a price. By defending her, the dragons had just declared war on the Elven Council. There would be no going back now. Lydia had to choose: destroy the human books and return to her quiet life, or accept the responsibility that Admiral Morgan had left for her. She looked at the mighty dragons waiting in her library, then thought about the void swarm approaching the galaxy. The choice was easier than she had expected. Lydia walked into the main hall to meet her new allies.